Hello everyone, welcome to FedScoop TV. My name is Greg Otto and we're here at the 2016 Red Hat Government Symposium, and I'm talking with Michael Hermus, the CTO for the Department of Homeland Security. Michael, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So we're at the end of an administration. Looking back, how has open source grown over this administration? Where do you see it going into the next one?
So I think that particularly towards the latter part of this administration, there's been a tremendous amount of progress towards adoption of open source and some of the principles that open source stands for. You look at things like the U.S. Digital Service and the USDS playbook, where one of the plays is actually really effectively calling for the use of open frameworks and open source tooling, which I think is in many cases a best practice, right? So they started there, and then I think more recently you've seen the Open Government Directive, which I'm sure lots of people have been talking about. Obviously a very strong push by the administration to herald in the age of open source in government. And as we know, there are two sides to the open source coin. They really have to be, they work together, but you can be simply a consumer of open source, where many people start trying to leverage all the great work that the communities have done out there and consume either the products or the frameworks or the libraries or whatever piece of the ecosystem that works for your particular use case, and simply consume but not contribute back and not actually publish out. And I think that's where a lot of government folks started. And I think the Open Government Directive is aimed at trying to kind of get to the other side of the coin, which is start encouraging folks to publish out, share within the federal government broadly, but also out to the community writ large. And I think that's a really fantastic effort there. What happens next is we have to figure out how to do that well.
Okay.
Right. This is new to a lot of folks inside federal government, and particularly you can't just tell folks to start publishing code and open source 20% of your code, because if you don't understand how you make the selection of what to open source and why, and then create a strong community around that open sourced product, it really will fail to live up to the value proposition that open source offers and promises. You have to create a governance model for how you manage the open source contributions. You have to create a strong community around that in order to truly leverage it. So I think a lot of the effort coming up is going to be not only accelerating the adoption and the consumption of open source, but also figuring out how we really harness the community that open source offers and how we can take advantage of that.
Okay. So cybersecurity, such a big deal, so top of mind in agencies. How does open source benefit that cybersecurity mission?
So again, I think it's probably what you've heard from many folks who you've talked to. A lot of traditional security folks have had concerns, or folks who aren't necessarily actually in the security realm have had concerns that by publishing out and open sourcing code, it makes it easier for folks to exploit vulnerabilities in that code or understand how it works. And you understand that mindset, right? There's a certain logic to it, but the reality is, and this is what many of the cybersecurity professionals will tell you, that there is no security through obscurity, right? You've heard that phrase, I'm sure. By simply making it opaque and hiding up whatever defects may exist doesn't mean it's safe. In fact, quite the opposite. The fact of the matter is that by open sourcing critical components and getting more eyes on them, you are able to more quickly identify critical flaws and vulnerabilities, but more importantly, address and mitigate them even more quickly. And I think it is far better for you to find the flaws and fix them than it is for an adversary to find the flaws. And so I think that is one area where open source really truly can improve our security posture, generally speaking. But I think the other thing is that the collaboration that the open source community brings allows us to find novel solutions to cybersecurity problems that working in a silo we wouldn't have found otherwise.
Right. Okay. So also a big push from this administration has been, IT modernization, making sure that we are using modern systems instead of the legacy trap that we're in. In the near future, how does open source benefit that move towards modern systems?
So I think there's a lot of benefits. I think personally, one of the things that we've worked at DHS, trying to engender the mindset that as we look for modernizing systems, legacy systems, or even net new applications that we're building, there had been historically a preference in the federal government for COTS, right? It was, listen, the fastest, easiest, cheapest, least risky solution must obviously be some off-the-shelf software. Right. It just seems, again, there's a certain logic to that. But the reality is, for mission-facing applications, for purpose-built applications, like many government federal agency missions are very unique, there's often not a solution that meets the needs exactly. And when you're in that scenario, trying to take an off-the-shelf product and customize it actually ends up being quite challenging, and it can lead to bad outcomes. And we've seen that over and over again. So the promise of open source here is that as we look to modernize these applications and build new applications and new capabilities, leveraging the platforms and the frameworks that open source has delivered to us enable us to very quickly build custom applications that meet our mission needs exactly. And we can do that for a fraction of the cost and the fraction of the time and with less risk than we used to be able to do custom applications historically. And that's in large part due to the powerful frameworks and platforms that the open source age has delivered us.
Great. Michael, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate your insight.
Thank you.